In the webinar, if you have any questions, can you please type them into the system, and in webinar jargon raise your hand and send them through to me so that I can answer the questions later in the webinar. We are recording the webinar, so we will be able to send you a copy of the link to YouTube so that you can view the webinar recording tomorrow afternoon. So we'll get started, and what we're going to be looking at today is to give you an introduction to ESS BIZGRANTS, a system to assist accountants and advisors to identify grants for small medium enterprises. And we're going to also look at an overview of the Australian government's new research connection grant, which has commenced. We believe that accountants can provide a very proactive service to your clients by assisting in identifying of grants that might be suitable for your individual clients. We think it's very important, and it's part of the supply of a range of services to your clients to assist them in their activities. So we're going to look at research connections. Incidentally, the government made some announcements yesterday about an industry growth centre, and I'll refer to that a little bit later. So there's starting to be some activities happening in Canberra. But the research connections is part of the Entrepreneurs Infrastructure Program. We already have the business improvement grants, and we now have the research connections. The concept is that an applicant will be allocated an experienced facilitator. These facilitators are drawn from private industry who understands the research industries, particularly with the universities. The concept is that this grant will be a facilitation first approach, so it's very different to the research grant that previously operated through Enterprise Connect, if you were familiar with it. This one is very different. So in the first instance, there's a facilitation process before there's any consideration of a possible grant. So the facilitation first approach is undertaken with an experienced facilitator who will be looking at what business opportunities are there, what areas are critical for further research, how that research might best be undertaken, and where is this expertise going to be obtained from. So that process is undertaken first, and in the guidelines there's obviously an assumption that that could be up to 2 months that facilitation process will take. The grant is of an amount of up to $50,000 on a 50-50 basis, therefore implying that the total project is to cost up to $100,000. But one of the other big changes in this grant is the government is only going to reimburse expenditure at the end of the grant. Therefore, if the client is going to receive a grant of $50,000, they effectively must be able to fund the $100,000 expenditure in their cash flow before they receive the government's grant. Now, that's a major change from previously, and it's a change from how the grants have normally been conducted. The government hasn't yet announced their Commercialising Ideas grant, which is also part of this stable of grants being handled by Entrepreneurs Infrastructure Program. I really hope that they don't try to impose the same sort of rules there, because that grant is supposed to have funds available of up to $250,000 on a 50-50 basis. A lot of businesses will have difficulty funding $500,000 out of their cash flow and then getting reimbursement from the government. So we wait to see what's happening there. The original program was to start commercialising ideas on the 1st of November. The government's website is now saying that the program will be announced by the end of 2014. So looks like it's on the back burner. So the government reimburses expenditure at the end of the project. These research funds can be used to hire a publicly funded research organisation, which is code for universities, and there's a few others that are registered as public funded research organisations, or placement of a researcher into the business. And an eligible researcher is going to be someone who's a graduate of a university or who currently works for one of these publicly funded research organisations. Now, the eligibility is a bit technical. Engaged in or expanding the applicant's operations to be engaged in interstate or overseas trade and commerce. I've got no idea why the word interstate's been put there, or overseas, but it's there. A foreign corporation formed in Australia. That seems very strange to me, but that's what's been included in the rules. A corporation of which trading or financial activities are a substantial or significant portion of the corporation's overall activities. And a corporation or body formed under the Commonwealth law. Well, that's the closest to what I understand is the real world situation as to who an applicant might be. So the or body undoubtedly refers to a trust, because in other guidelines the government department has indicated that the applications can be made by a company or a company acting as trustee of a trust. This is one of the other big changes, and it's continuing the trend that the Entrepreneurs Infrastructure Program has obviously adopted, and that is that applicants must be from one of these 5 key industries, and these are the industries that the government has identified as being presumably the most important for Australia's future. I'll leave it to you to decide whether you agree with that approach. But advanced manufacturing, food and agribusiness with a very big exception that doesn't cover actually growing or producing animals for food. It's basically external activities and manufacturing activities, food and agribusiness. Medical technologies and pharmaceuticals, but not including medical practices or pharmacies, even though they were originally included in the Business Improvement Grant when it was first announced in July. So it's medical technologies and pharmaceuticals, can include a specialist medical practice so long as a significant proportion of the time of the specialist medical practice is spent in research activities. Mining equipment, technology and services, which covers the actual mining of coal, minerals, gas, and the processing of it. And the last one is oil, gas and energy resources. So they're the 5 key industries that the government is obviously very confident that are the key industries for Australia going forward. And then the rules say there could be 4 other industry groups that can get a research grant as long as they are supplying enabling technologies to service those 5 primary industry targets. So they're freight and logistics, infrastructure-related construction, information and communication technology, and professional services. Now, there's a very restricted list of professional services. So don't get excited. It doesn't cover accountants. It basically covers scientific research, architecture, engineering and technical services, advertising. I don't know how advertising gets in there, but it has. Other professional scientific and technical services, and computer system design and related services. Now, other professional services can include professional photography, interpretation, meteorological, non-financial asset broking. What that's got to do with any of this, I don't know. Translation services and weather station operations. So, unfortunately, I think there's been a bit of poor wording in the regulations, and but if you've got someone, it's a weather station operation, turnover more than $1.5 million operating through a company, and as long as they're doing research, well, they might be able to get a grant. But I don't think there'll be too many applicants like that around. The next area to look at is the eligibility entity. That's a company or corporate trustee for a trust. So a trust with a two individuals acting as trustees is not eligible. It has to be a corporate trustee. The business must have operated for 3 consecutive years and lodged annual business activity statements, and it must have a minimum turnover of $1.5 million unless the business is located in a remote or very remote location, when the minimum turnover only needs to be $750,000, and the maximum turnover in all categories is $100 million. The business must be solvent, able to pay its bills as they fall due, obviously able to pay the total project amount because the government's reimbursement is not going to come until the end, and there's no indication of how long after the end of the project the government's payment will be made. There is a necessity for a report to be lodged, which on past experience, whenever reports have got to be lodged before there's further money to be paid, the department will insist on receiving the report first. So your client would be wise to budget a further 1 to 2 months after the project ends before they're going to receive their 50%, and they need to make sure that the final report and submission of expenditure is submitted in accordance with the regulations. Otherwise there will be a further delay in receiving the money. And last but not least, in this summary of what the eligibility requirements might be for this research funding, the client needs to be able to demonstrate a need for Commonwealth funding. So if the business is a very well-off financial business, it's probably got no chance of securing one of these grants in any case. So to apply, have you got clients who might be interested? It's worth going through and searching them. Use ESS BIZGRANTS, which we're going to show you a live demonstration of in a moment, to assist in identifying your clients. And then all you'd have to do is contact the Entrepreneurs Infrastructure Program, and you can do that through the new government all-in-one website for business, www.business.gov.au, and click onto Grants and then onto Entrepreneurs Infrastructure Program, and then to the section relative to the research connections, and you'll then see a item that you can click onto to register your interest or your client's interest. Your client will then be contacted by one of the private enterprise facilitators who are engaged to coordinate this process. So if you've got clients that meet the guidelines, that's very good. My criticism, I suppose, of this program is that it's very restricted. The ICT industry is not very impressed. They're saying Why has the ICT work got to be just for those 5 industries? Hasn't included games, which is a huge ICT industry in Australia and in the world. So I'm sure there's going to be some complaints on the ongoing basis. But anyhow, let's move on. Product demonstration. What we're now going to do is go onto the ESS BIZTOOLS website to give you a live overview of the ESS BIZTOOLS product. I've gone straight into the site, so we'll go back and look at the beginning part of the site when we finish the demonstration. When you first go onto the site, within the members home area, there is some guidelines on how you might go through and establish the client profile. We'll go on and do a client profile now. So when you go to client profiles, you will have a list of your clients that you've entered profiles for previously. You don't need to remove these each year. We're using cloud technology, so it's going to be very easy to just go back in and find the client next year and put some new details in. So in the first instance, you need to identify a name. You can put a code name in if you like. We'll just put in a hopefully a fictitious name, Western Manufacturing, but it's just me playing around, so don't go thinking it's one of your clients. P/L. You then need to identify what type of entity the applicant is. The default is to company because companies are able to obtain virtually every grant that the federal government offers. I'd probably say every grant, but I was hesitant to say that in case there is 1 or 2 that they can't get. But some of these other entities might be eligible, so if that's the type of entity that your client has, you need to click onto that to identify. So we'll leave it as a company. You can, in the client name or reference, if you want to, you can use a code name because we are using cloud technology. Then there's the questions. Do you export products or services? We'll say yes, we do some exporting. The company I've got is Western Manufacturing. It's at Blacktown, New South Wales, and it has a turnover of 6.8 million. It does some exporting. It also does some importing of some parts, so we'll click imports. We then need to answer how many employees. We have gone through and put some bands of employee numbers in that comply with the legislation. And this business has got 25 people, so we're going to tick in the 20 to 200 category. Do you have an ABN? If we don't answer yes, we're not going to be shown any grants because businesses cannot get a grant unless they've got an ABN. How many years have you been operating? This business has been going for 8 years. You can see from what I just went through and discussed with you on Research Connections that the number of years of operation is very important. Research Connections says more than 3 years. I don't know what that means to a researcher who's out there and has researched something, but obviously they're not going to get a Guernsey under that program, Research Connections. But we've been in activity for more than 3 years, so we tick over 3 years. The next big question is turnover. And again, we have bands of turnover which fits into the grants. This business had a turnover of 6.8 million, I said, so we're going to click $1.5 to $20 million as the band in which we've obviously identified grants. There's a lot of grants within that band of turnover. Are you registered for GST? The business needs to be registered, but we just need to click yes. Are you tax exempt? The default answer is no. If you tick yes, you will not get offered grants, because the grants in ESS BIZGRANTS are for businesses, not for charities or not for profits. Are you involved in research and development? This business does do some research and development. You don't have to worry at this stage whether it's more than $20,000 in a year. We just want to identify if they do some research and development, and we've then linked, if you answer yes to that question, to some of the other grants which we believe you would need to have undertaken research and development if you're going to be a successful applicant. So we'll save that information. Now that didn't take long, about 3 minutes for me to enter those details, and I'm not the fastest typist on the block. So we'll say that the business operates at 1234 Sydney Road in Blacktown. And obviously that's in New South Wales, and the postcode is 2148. So we'll put that in. The system has then decided that Blacktown with that postcode is situated within what is termed the major cities of Australia, obviously Sydney. There are a few benefits still for some of these zones. There's zones around Australia of regional and outer regional and major cities, and then remote and very remote. They're based on the health industry maps, but to determine grants. The financial information's just repeated there, so you can have a look at that. The big question now is the business industry code, and for those of you who have seen our product over the last couple of years, this is now the major change that has occurred in ESS BIZGRANTS, because we are now going to utilise the ATO's business industry codes as a means of trying to zero in on the particular grants. If you know a keyword, and I'll come back to this in a moment because we're going to put a keyword, because this is a steel fabricator, you can put a keyword. We'll put the word steel in there a little later. But and if you know the number for their classification, you just insert that there straight away. If you don't know, you can click on to the link we have to the ATO's business industry codes. You're probably familiar with those. You'll know that there's an alphabetical index, and an industry index. So you can go onto this if you wish and do a search to find what code applies to your client's businesses. A client could have more than one code. So you go through and select it. There's the alphabetical. Then you're probably aware that you can again go on to the industry code to see what you're doing. So I'll just go back to here though and put in the word steel. So this is a steel fabricator, and hit search. The system has now gone through and identified the businesses that have got some connection to steel in their name. And here's what I'm looking for, the structural metal product manufacturing 22210. So if you're happy that that's what, you just click on that. And on the other side here now we have that industry. If we want to get rid of it, you've changed your mind, you just click that cross with on the red background, and that will remove that, and you can go back to your list here. Or as I said, you could have just typed in 22210 there is the code at the very beginning, and in most cases I assume that's what will happen. You will know your client's code because that's what you're placing on the tax return. If there's more than one code, and let's say they also do some basic for us, we'll click on that. So we have 2 codes there now, and that will do us to get this search done, I'm sure. If we hit search grants now, the system is showing us that we're potentially eligible for 10 grants for this particular client. The client would probably also come up as being eligible for the research connections that I was referring to earlier. That has not been put into our system yet. It was only announced last week, but we'll be putting that into the system soon. So you can see we've got 10 potential grants. So if you want to read what the grants are about, you just click on, and there's a summary sheet as to what this particular grant's about. Now, the apprenticeship incentives for apprentices with disabilities applies to virtually every type of business. There are major changes planned by the government on the apprenticeship scheme from the end of June next year, but obviously at this time we're still working with what's the current rules. So there's a summary, there's an application toolkit, so that if you wanted to read some information as to how this operates, if you click there, the system will bring up the paper that has been produced within ESS BIZTOOLS on the apprenticeship scheme as it currently exists. So you can look at that and say, okay, yeah, we understand that. Then there's some additional criteria, and this one's pretty simple. There's only one additional question. Are you proposing to employ an apprentice trainee who has a disability and will undertake a certificate 2 or higher level course? Now, you might look at that and say, well, our client might like to do that. He's a very responsible person and he has talked to about hiring someone with a disability. Or alternatively, you might just note that, and when you have a conversation with your client, you can indicate that to him. So if we click yes, the system's immediately brought up another item, apply now. If we click apply now, you will then get the URL that you can go to the apprenticeship organisation that will give you the details of the 300 apprenticeship organisations that currently exist around Australia that you could then contact to get the details of how your client could access an apprentice. You won't go to there, we'll close. Now when we're closing, the system is then making up its mind as to whether you are eligible or ineligible. We started with 9. If we just go up and we go to potentially eligible, we've now got one. It's identified that it's potentially eligible. If it was decided it was ineligible, it would be listed in the potentially ineligible. So we just go to a couple more. The Australian Bureau of Statistics comes up in every case because it's a product that is available to every business in Australia. It used to cost about $8,000 or $9,000 7 or 8 years ago, probably longer, 10 years ago. And the Howard government under Peter Costello made that information free. There's a wealth of information there that every business should be using. But let's have a look. Here's the Business Growth Grant that I was referring to earlier. It's part of the Entrepreneurs Infrastructure Program. So this is for a business that's in manufacturing. So it gives you an idea there, tells you the eligibility. And this is for a business growth grant. The grant's up to $20,000 on a 50% basis. So you can read the summary and say, oh yeah, I think the Western Manufacturing Company, I think we called it, would be interested in that. There's a summary of the funding. You can virtually get from $500 to $20,000 on a 50% basis. The toolkit, we have a couple of papers there. One's on the business growth grants, summarising how that process works. So you can read that and say yes. You could print this up and have it available there for your client to have a conversation with them when they come in. And there's the summary. This is also, as those grant research connection grants, the same industry. So you can look at that and say, well, that's good. And if you wanted to, you can look at the paper which is just specifically on the peculiarities that apply to advanced manufacturing. Most of it's summarized in the first paper, but then we're going to look at what's the definition of manufacturing under the government's guidelines, etc. So if we go back to there, then we can then decide, yes, we're going to have a look at additional criteria. There's a few more questions there. Is the business solvent? Remember I said on the research connections it has to be solvent. Has the business been operating under an approved structure for more than 3 years? So if the business was in a sole trader for 2.5 years and 6 months ago the sole trader rolled it into a company, that's still an eligible structure. That's a change from Enterprise Connect. It wasn't so liberal in that area. Has the applicant ever received a business growth grant or a tailored service grant under the Enterprise Connect program? Now, these answers are obviously yes, no. I'm going to answer yes to that just to show you what happened. And that's now put across there, which is really telling us that we're not going to be eligible. Well, we'll go through the process. Does the business provide high-value manufactured goods and services? We'll say yes, it does all that. But the problem there is it's not showing that apply now. And when we go through close, it's going to place that particular potential grant into the ineligible category because you can't apply if you've already had one. So we go to potentially ineligible. And then you might say, well, why has that happened? So we bring it up and have a look at it. And you might go back into the additional criteria. You can see you've answered no, so you answered yes, which is incorrect. You change your mind, say no, that answer should be no. So you can correct the system pretty quickly if you think that you may have answered a question incorrectly. You can then go to apply now, and there's the application link to the one and all business grant area these days. So if we close now, the system will remove that entry from the ineligible grants and will place it in the eligible grants. So we'll have a look. Potentially ineligible is now nothing, and we have these two grants in potentially eligible. If you go back to pending, you can just keep on going, working your way through those grants to end up with probably out of that list, which was originally 10, I think you might have half a dozen grants there, or the R&D incentive that you'd want to make available to your client. But time's moving on, so we might just go to the potentially eligible. The icons now come up, print report. We'll go to the report so you can see the report. So the report gets printed in the name of the client. Prepared by would be your firm's name that's been registered with ESS BIZGRANT. The report is dated, which obviously allows you to produce a number of these. It gives that synopsis of what the grant's about and tells the client what the funding could be. The same thing for the business growth grant. The disclaimer at the bottom is basically saying that the client's still got to go through the application process, and that can obviously be manipulated by the government at any time by changing the rules. So all the system is providing is an indication that they could be eligible. So our suggestion is you would sit down and have a conversation with your client and produce this report. You could have printed up the supporting papers so that the client's got a better idea. And basically what you would be saying to the client in a very proactive manner, we've identified these grants for you. Do you wish us to proceed with applications for any of these grants that where the grant report is identified that you could be eligible for. In my experience, well over 95% of clients will give you the green light to proceed. What you then need to do is to confirm to them that you're going to open a separate fee file for this work and you will be billing them separately. Now, you might only get involved in the application process and doing with the government department, but for many of these grants, especially that business growth grant that we were just looking at, a significant amount of that work can be done by accountants who are offering business advisory services. I think this is a great way to get involved in business advisory services. And if you are a subscriber to ESS BIZTOOLS, you will receive a lot of the templates, the tools to assist you in undertaking business plans, strategic plans, budgeting, human resources systems reviews, because they're the sort of work that is available to be performed under the business growth grant and some of the other grants. When do you have this conversation with the client? At this time of the year, we recommend that this report be prepared as part of the annual accounts process. It will take about 3 minutes to put that initial profile into the system. Probably 1 minute to update it every year from there on. It will take a few minutes, there's no doubt, but maybe 5 to 6 minutes for someone who understands the clients to go through and answer the questions that come up so that you can try to have an understanding. Or alternatively, you could have the client sitting in front of you and have them giving you the answers to those questions. It just depends how long you want to spend on the process. But then you have a report to be able to submit to them in a very proactive manner. The main reason we created this product was David Smith, the former chairman of the Institute of former chairman of the Chartered Institute, and managing director of Smith Inc. 2020, was conducting due diligence reviews for one of the accounting aggregators a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, and part of that process was to interview the SME clients of accountants who had indicated they'd like to sell their businesses to the aggregator on some basis. And David rang me and we had a discussion over dinner one night, and he said, I am finding that a significant number of the small businesses are complaining to me that their accountants are not keeping them informed of grants. They're not very happy to find out that one of their competitors has got a grant and they knew nothing about it. So for that reason, we decided we would write what is now known as ESS BIZGRANTS to help accountants identify the grants and then manage the process with your clients. If you elect to do whatever you can of the work, you won't be able to do it all, but you should be able to project manage the process so that there's less chance of your client going off and talking to other people who may be inclined to try to convince the client to go and see some other accountant for one reason or another, and we all know that happens, poaching. If you are unable to do the work and you don't want to do it, well, you can refer back to us, and we will put you in contact with firms who will give you a signed undertaking that they will not poach the client so that they can undertake the work for you. But I really do recommend that you do undertake as much of this work as you possibly can yourself. So what I'm doing now is going back to the beginning of the system. It's probably easier for me to just do that. So what I've now brought up is the website that you would see if you logged on to ESS BIZGRANTS. And there is a case study there. There's also a testimonial from David Smith. This is all in the free area that you can visit. In the pricing, you will see that we have a 2-week free trial for you to test out 2 or 3 of your clients to see how the system works. And Our subscription is $43 per month, excluding GST for 12 months, or slightly less if you pay it up front at $450 plus GST for the year. So for $495, including GST, you receive a wonderful product that will assist you in the identification of grants for your clients. I'm just going to see if there's any questions. I can't see that there's any questions that have been entered into the system. If you think of some questions later on, please send us an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au, and we will get back to you with an answer. The other service we offer to our subscribers to ESS BIZGRANTS is that we conduct monthly webinars for subscribers where we try to go through some practical reviews of grants so that you have a full appreciation of how the grant process works. If you elect to subscribe to ESS BIZTOOLS Gold Package, you will receive a subscription to ESS BIZGRANTS as part of that package. So for no additional cost, the subscription to ESS BIZTOOLS Gold Package is $2,700 plus GST for 12 months, 24/7 access to all components of ESS BIZTOOLS, including our personal property securities register due diligence system, which we released a couple of weeks ago, and obviously ESS BIZGRANTS. So thank you very much for participating in this webinar today. I hope to hear from you and look forward to welcoming you as a subscriber to ESS BIZGRANTS.